Angels help out when we're down and depressed. So first, turn to 1 Kings chapter 18. 1 Kings 18. This is Elijah, and he's in ministry. He had a wonderful ministry in chapter 18. He defeats all the prophets of Baal and the prophets of Asherah, and fire comes down from heaven, and it's like there's this great revival. 1 Kings chapter 19, there's a woman who hears about it, and her name is Jezebel. And I mean, this woman is like sold out to the devil all the way. She is a vicious, mean. I don't know if I've ever preached a sermon just on Jezebel, but she is nasty and devilish. And there was one time her husband was, I want a piece of land and I can't get it. She's like, I'll get it for you. And she just has this nasty thing to have the guy killed, that he cursed God somehow. So she like represents Satan. Verse 3, she hears about what happened and says, I'm going to kill him in verse 2. Verse 3, Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there. While he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, he came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. I've had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I'm no better than anyone else, my ancestors. And then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. He is burned out. He is depressed. He's ready to die. He wants God to take him home. I'm sure many of us have been there. And when you're depressed and down, verse 9, you do a lot of sleeping. Or verse 5, excuse me. You do a lot of sleeping. You're just spiritually, physically, emotionally, completely drained. But then we read, all at once an angel touched him and said, get up and eat. He looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. I know I'm going to spiritualize this, but the Word of God is compared to bread. And so the hot bread just reminds me of getting a hot meal from the Lord in the Scriptures. And then the water reminds me of the water of life, of the Spirit of God. But then he drank and he ate, and then he lay down again. So he wasn't, so to speak, healed immediately from his depression. So verse 7, the angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you. So he got up and he ate and he drank. And then strengthened by that food, he traveled to meet with the Lord. So when you're down and depressed, and let's say the depression, there's lots of reasons for depression, okay? That could be lots of different reasons. But let's talk about spiritual depression. You've been under attack spiritually, and you are depressed. Now, I know there are Christian counselors that can be helpful and maybe talk with you to process what's going on in your head, and God often will use that. And I know God often will use doctors to give you some kind of medicine that puts more endorphins to help you have some feel good in your mind. I'm not sure, and maybe that helps somehow, that if you get into a better frame of mind, then you can talk it out a little bit more. But I'm going to give you one more, like from spiritual doctor to you, which is I really think there is power in when you get down and depressed, do not neglect to eat from the Word and drink from the Spirit. I have found in my life that I think that probably has been very, very beneficial and almost miraculous. The Bible itself says in Psalm, if you read most of Psalm 19, it says the Bible revives the soul. And there's all kinds of verses on the power of the Word of God to change your mind and your thinking. And so I think God can use the other things, but nothing like a hot meal from the Word of God and asking God to fill you with His Spirit. And sometimes you'll say, well, I already tried that, Pastor. So did Elijah. It had to be the second time. And maybe it's the third time sometimes, but be in the Word of God.